Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of the Hebrew month of Av, is known as the day in which the Jewish world remembers the destruction of the two temples in Jerusalem. During this day, we mourn the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem, we observe 5 prohibitions, and read the Book of Lamentations. The destruction of the temple is considered part of the consequences of the growth of our egoism. It is also part of the correction man needs to do, through a process called the 6,000 years. These 6,000 years are divided into 3 groups of 2,000 years. 2,000 years of Tahu, 2,000 years of Torah, and 2,000 years of Mashiach. According to the Mishnah, in Tanit 4-6, 5 events occurred during the 9th of Av. The first calamity was the incident of the 12 spies who Moshe sent to spy the land of Canaan, where only 2 brought a good report about the land and 10 did not. The Midrash quotes God as saying about this event, "You cried before me pointlessly, I will fix for you this day as a day of crying for the generations," alluding to the future misfortunes which occurred on the same date. The second was the destruction of the first temple by Nebuchadnezzar in 587 BCE. The third calamity was the destruction of the second temple by the Romans in the year 70 of the Common Era. The fourth was the Roman victory over the rebels of Bar Kokhba. Then following the crushing of Bar Kokhba, the Roman commander Turnus Rufus plowed the site of the temple in Jerusalem and the surrounding area, in 135 CE. Throughout history, other events affecting negatively the Jewish people happened during or around the 9th of Av. In the 9th of Av, there are some laws and customs that have a significant Kabbalistic meaning, and bring hope for the entire people of Israel and the world. As part of the observations and customs, we observe 21 days, or 3 weeks before the 9th of Av, and the last 9 days of these 21 days. The 3 weeks leading up to Tisha B'Av are known as the 3 weeks, while the 9 days leading up to Tisha B'Av are known as the 9 days. In Tisha B'Av there are 5 prohibitions. 1. No eating or drinking. 2. No washing or bathing. 3. No application of creams or oils. 4. No wearing of leather shoes. 5. No marital sexual relations. As Ramon will explain, these prohibitions also have Kabbalistic meaning.
So why do we have these 5 restrictions? So we have these 5 restrictions in order to remind us of the importance of, on that day, not receiving for ourselves, and why we want to be on that level and not receiving for our own sake. It's because we want to be, these are the 5 levels of the development of the light, in which we have Atzmuto, which is the essence of the Creator. Then we have Shoresh, which is pure light. This is basically Sephira Keter. Then we have finally a vessel that will receive that light, which is the first level of reception of the light, called Chokmah. Then we have Bina, and Bina is actually a desire that restricts itself. It doesn't want to receive the light for its own sake, because it wants to be like the giver. It wants to be like this level appears, so it stops receiving the light in order to give back to the Creator, right? So what we want to resemble is this here, in order to get to a level in which we will start receiving in order to give, in a level that we will not be in an egoistic desire, because everything that we're doing, the eating and the drinking and the washing and bathing, application of creams and oils in our body, not wearing leather shoes, no sexual relationships and things like that, has to do with the level Malchut, which is the level of receiving for the self. So if I really want to that day make a correction, I'm gonna do these type of restrictions, and I'm not gonna basically care about the body, who basically is a desire to receive, is pure Malchut, right? I want to raise myself from the side or level of receiving to the level of giving, an altruistic desire. Why? Because on that day, what we need to understand is that it was our egoistic nature, it was our egoistic desires for power, honor, and glory that brought down the two temples. And it has been throughout time also the reason why we fall into calamities as part of the people of Israel, because there's no union between us. We need to unify ourselves, start loving each other even with our differences. It doesn't matter if you're Reform, Orthodox, or Conservative, or humanistic Judaism. Doesn't matter where you come from. You're part of Israel, and we should love each other. It doesn't matter our differences. And that's the whole point. We are at a level when it comes to religion in which we think that the only ones that are right are the ones that belong to our branch or religion. And in reality, that belongs to this level down here. It has nothing to do with a level that is going to bring us to loving each other as ourselves. So Tisha B'Av is a day that reminds us that we need to understand that loving each other is the key for the future, not only of the whole Israel, but the future of humanity as well. The crisis that we're going through and everything are a reminder that everything that we go through is because of our lack of empathy and sympathy for other people, or lack of putting ourselves in the shoes of other people and seeing their point of view from a side of love, because it's not the same to see the other person's point of view with a biased mind. You gotta see it from a different bias, a bias of love, unconditional love. And what we have here is a day that we are remembering the destruction of the temples, but we also need to remember that it's because of unfounded hate that this day is celebrated within the people of Israel. And we need to start then, as Rabbi Cook pointed out, we need to not err on unfounded hate. We rather err on unfounded love. So that's basically the reason we do these restrictions, in order to forget about the love of the self and transform this into a love for the Creator, a love for what He wants us to do. And eventually we will come to this level, and this level actually is a level what we call a level of correction, in which it will receive in order to give, and there's a reciprocal relationship between creation and human beings. Okay, so this is what we need to understand, and in this day, that the restrictions have to do basically with this level here, that we want to become that level. Once we're in that level of Bina, which is the level of bestowal, the Creator will then give us everything else. It will help us. As it says, he who comes to purify is helped. So this day we need to purify ourselves, and we will be helped by the light of the Creator.
As mentioned before, Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of the Hebrew month of Av, is known as the day in which the Jewish world remembered the destruction of the two temples in Jerusalem. During this day, we mourn the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem. We observe 5 prohibitions and read the Book of Lamentations. But there is an important message that this day has for all humanity. Love others as you love yourself. The destruction of the temple was the result of unfounded hate. This day is an opportunity to start building our hearts and remember why we are in this physical reality. We are here to unite the Shekinah back with her counterpart. Ramon will explain why this day is a day that is an opportunity for changing our hearts.
So in order to understand the whole point of Tisha B'Av, and why this day that we observe and mourn the temples and mourn all the calamities that happened to Israel, because remember, it's not only the temples that were destroyed in Jerusalem throughout the years. The Israel people has suffered many other calamities. For example, the expulsion of different countries. like in the Sephardic tradition, the expulsion of Spain, and where Jews were basically forced to convert or die, or simply leave and live in exile, and never been able to come back or hide their Judaism and become what is called conversos. So in these days are not different. We still see the hate, sometimes unfounded hate against the Jewish people. For no reason, we have organizations that claim to be human rights activists, and the first thing they do is attack the Jewish people, and sometimes even attacking the Jews because of the conflict and the relationship between Israel and its surrounding countries. But what do we need to understand is that all this is a part of a process that it's by design, done by the Creator in order to help us correct. Okay, and we need to understand the 6,000 years of correction properly in order to see why we're going through these things. Why is it that we have the instructions of the temple, that kind of stuff? And to understand that, we need to understand that before there was a soul, there was a body that was being developed. Just like science said, there was an animal that evolved. The animal evolved enough to the point that when the situation with the tree of life and or the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and Adam not being able to eat of the tree of life properly because of what he did, eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil before eating of the tree of life, which was supposed to happen on the seventh day. He ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil prematurely, so his soul descended. His soul descended to a physical body, so he was clothed in skin. So as Kabbalists, we say basically that that's what happened with Adam. He basically descended to an animal level, and we say that this is actually the beginning of what we call man, the physical man, receiving a soul, receiving this point in the heart that will yearn for unification with his Creator. And the only way he can achieve that unification and once again is ascend back to the source of it all, which is the word of Asilut. And the only way he can do that is by achieving similarity with the Creator. And similarity with the Creator means that the Creator is all bestowal. The Creator is all giving. So we need to achieve that. And that's something that in Tisha B'Av we try to do when we do the restrictions that we do, that we don't care pretty much about our desires, or bodily desires. We care mostly about the spiritual desires. We even, when we are studying the book of Lamentation, we even sit on the floor, we don't sit on a chair, because we want to feel as low as possible, meaning descend, because it is a descent. We are observing a descent of our soul, not only to physical realm, but also, a descent. Every time the temple was destroyed, it was a descent. It's considered a descent, that we were lower and lower. The Kabbalah said that by the second temple, when the second temple was destroyed, Israel was actually descended to the level of the nations, and that's why they're among the nations. Okay, now let's move this picture a little more so we can see. So what we have is that in these years, right, in the years of after Adam's descent, these years are considered the 2,000 years of Tohu, 2,000 years of chaos, right? During those years, almost at the end, before starting the years of Torah, we have a person that is born, is called Abraham. And Abraham is the first human being that actually, after all the corrections that were done in the beginning from the generation of Adam and the generation of Noah, this person was born, and this person is the embodiment of the Sephirah Chesed. And it is very important to understand that he represents the Sephirah Chesed, because every process in creation that requires correction starts with that Sephirah. So you have the 7 days of creation, and the 7 days of creation correspond to the 7 Sephirot, the 7 Lord Sephirot, meaning Serampin and Mahut, which is Chesed, Geburah, Tifaret, Nesachot, Yesod, and Mahut. And the first Sephirah is always Chesed. That's where you start always. So Abraham was the embodiment of Chesed, and then you're gonna see that you're gonna find that Isaac then was the embodiment of Geburah, and Jacob, who later became Israel, was the embodiment of what is called Tifaret. But then these 2,000 years are over, and then we have something happening from there, because this is also the generation where the Babel Tower, was created, and this generation also spread out over the world and started building cities and all that, and that's what creates this development of the ego. And let's go to the other 2,000 years, right? As the development of our egoism grows more and more, during that time we receive the written Torah. So we get out of Egypt, and now we receive the written Torah. So Abraham was born, and his descendants then receive the written Torah. So that means they're going to be continuing what he started, but now it's going to be on a basically not of a group of people or tribes only. Now they're going to become a nation, and then as a nation they're going to be giving the example of how 12 different types of people, if you will, can actually live together and create a system in which everybody can love each other. And of course, they fall short on that later. Then what we're gonna have is, because again the disconnection of the people of Israel with the Creator, and all these different I would say internal struggles in which there was corruption. There was not only in corruption and with the kings and all that, there was corruption also in the temple and all. So that's when we have the destruction of the first temple, and that's another descent. You have the first descent with Adam. You have then another descent with the people of the generation of the flood. You have another descent with the people of the generation of Babylon, of the Tower of Babel. And then you have also a descent of the people, when we say they went down to Egypt. It was a descent to that level of Egypt in which it's all egoism, but they were still, able to get out of there and start receiving the written Torah. And when they received the written Torah, they needed to continue the development and correction that as a nation, in order to achieve similarity with the Creator. But it wasn't achieved, so that's why we have then the first temple is destroyed by the Babylonians, right? And these years are considered the years of Torah, 2,000 years of Torah. The first ones were the years of Tohu. These are 2,000 years of Torah. Then after that, what we have is, as the egoism grows and grows, we enter the 2,000 years of Mashiach. And we're not saying that this is the time where Mashiach is right now. We're saying that this is a time where all of us need to work internally. A lot of people want Mashiach now. They want Mashiach now. The only way Mashiach can come in if all of us start working internally. If we become our own personal Mashiach or personal Messiah. If I work on myself, if you work on yourself, and both of us start loving each other and putting our differences below and love above our differences, we will achieve the time of Mashiach, probably before the end of the 2,000 years. But what happened during these 2,000 years that we call the 2,000 years of Mashiach? Egoism continues to grow very high, right? During this time, we have the Roman Empire already in the land of Israel, and because of unfounded hatred, we see that basically because of the gossip and humiliation of people towards each other, the second temple is destroyed. Not only is destroyed, Jerusalem is destroyed, and people are exiled from the land once again to this day. So do not think that the Roman exile is finished. It's not finished. It's still with us. It's still, an exile that we haven't got out of. We have the land of Israel, but we're still in exile. Spiritually, we're still in exile, and also we're still on the exile of Edom, as they call it. But what happened after the destruction of the temple was we received something called the Zohar. The Zohar is written in the 3rd century, right? But it was hidden. It was hidden. But then it gets discovered once again in the 11th century. During that time, years or centuries later, we have also the Ari. The Arizal is born, and he's the one that takes all the codes of the Zohar and makes it more simple to understand, and everything is passed down to his disciples. And one of his disciples, Chaim Vital, then writes down all of the Arizal's teachings and put them together in a compendium of books called the Tree of Life. And from there we have what we call the Modern Kabbalah, because before that there was no name. Kabbalah was the name Kabbalah. It was mostly called Maaseh Bereshit or Maaseh Kabbalah, depending on what you were working with. So from here on, you're gonna find that there were a lot of other Kabbalists that were born during this time, and during this time, you're gonna find Kabbalists like most recently we will have the Baal HaSulam, whose real name is Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag, and he will take the writings of the Ari and put them in a language that simple people can understand it and people can relate to them, and also emphasizing on a more modern way of understanding Kabbalah. Throughout that time, from the 3rd century all the way to where we are right now, the egoism continues to grow. And what's happening? Right now, we are basically facing what we call a barrier, a mahzon. While we're facing that is the following. In the past, people didn't live that long. Today, we basically live probably twice or 3 times longer than the people in the, let's say, the 1st century, 2nd century would live. Even 3 centuries ago, people were not living that long like we're living today. So now we find ourselves with more time to think about what's my life for? What am I living here for? What's the meaning of life? So we have more time to see that. So now our egoism has grown, not only for physical things, but we have found out, because we're spending more time in this physical reality, that it's not about the physical things, it's also about the spiritual things. So how can we actually go to spirituality? Because on this side here, this is spirituality, just that you have this barrier right now, and this barrier won't let you go towards spirituality, because right now, in order to achieve that spirituality, is if you join forces with other people, and all of you, including myself, with other people, join together, and we start working on what is called loving each other as ourselves. Is the key. That's the key, basically, to achieve spirituality. And Tisha B'Av is actually teaching us about that. All the descents that we have, all the mourning that we have on Tisha B'Av, should be about mourning, should be about thinking, how can we build those temple, or that third temple that people are waiting for. They're waiting for a physical temple, but they need to build first their heart. The heart, the egoism, and transform it into altruism. And like I mentioned before, the whole point is to transform Malchut, which is basically a vessel of pure egoism, pure receiving, and transform it into a vessel that will also become altruistic. And that way we achieve what is called the level of Mashiach, which is a level basically of Serampim. And one thing that is that we need to keep in mind is the following, that these 6,000 years are not only years themselves, they're also, let's put it more like that. So they're basically like a parsuf. So the whole system is like a parsuf. So what you're gonna find is here, if you are studying Kabbalah, you're gonna see that a parsuf has a head, which is Rosh. It has also a Toch, which is, like the torso, the body, and it has a Sof, which is an ending at the end. So imagine this, like standing up instead of being horizontal. So imagine this vertical. That would be the head, the torso, and that would be basically like the legs. And we mentioned that as well, that there are certain days that we observe. We observe basically 3 weeks before the 9th of Av, and those 3 weeks are basically 21 days, and the 9th of Av is basically the 22nd day. So when you have basically 22 days, that refers basically, or tells you about the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and also the 22 path that connects all the Sephirot in the Tree of Life. So basically it's telling you that little by little the system was falling apart until the temple was destroyed. So that's how we celebrate these 3 weeks. And we say that it was the time when the siege of Jerusalem started and all that. But the symbolism is basically about the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And then the 22nd day completes all the letters, meaning that's when the destruction of the temple happened. Also 22, right? 22 days for the 9th of Av. But we celebrate also what is called 9 days. And those 9 days, if you take from the 21 days, you subtract 9 days, the number that you're going to have is the number 12. Number 12, if you write it in Hebrew, you're going to have a Beit and a Yod. The Beit stand for the Beit Hamikdash, which is a temple, and the Yod stands for Jerusalem. So it's telling you, that this is about the Beit Hamikdash and Jerusalem, So after that, the 9 days symbolizes basically the 9 upper Sephirot, not including Malchut. So the same thing here. We're gonna see here also the 9 days until Tisha B'Av. But the difference here is we can do 2 things. We can build a third temple, or we can basically build it through the path of pain instead of through the path of love. So what we have is, in these first 2,000 years, the vessels that are working there as the vessels of Chabad, which is Chesed, Bina, and that. I mean, Chokmah, Bina, and that. That's basically the forces that are working here, or the Sephirot that are working here. In this side here, what we have is Hagat, which is Chesed, Gebura, and Tifaret. Then, in these 2,000 years, which are the 2,000 years of the Mashiach, what we have is Nesat, Hok, and Yesod working. And it's very important to understand that, because basically this is the upper Sefirot. That's when Abraham was born. So these people here were able to still have some kind of contact with the Creator. Then when we have this here, the years of Torah, we have the vessels basically that are Tifaret, Chesed, Geburah, Tifaret, and this is where Israel basically is born and start being part of the correction of the whole humanity. Then after that we have the time of Mashiach, and that is Nesahot and Yesod. And Yesod is very important because Yesod is the key for Malchut, which is the most egoistic of all the vessels, to connect to the upper one. So in this whole process, what we really are doing is we're working in connecting the Shekhinah to Serampin. So we're basically connecting Malchut to Serampin, connecting Malchut through this Yesod, and eventually to Tifaret, who receive from Bina. But the only way we can achieve that is if we connect to the forces of altruism. And this is how basically our whole history, if you will, of humanity is all about. And we're still in this barrier here. We cannot pass that barrier. The only way we can pass the barrier is if we start working with each other, we start loving each other above our own differences, and if we start also thinking that the only way I can advance spiritually if I care for your spirituality, if I do the best I can to help you advance. It's not an advance for my own sake, it's an advance for humanity's sake. So I hope you know that this message of Tisha B'Av is not a message only of mourning, but it's a message of hope for everybody as well. And by understanding the Kabbalistic meaning of this day and what is the internal work that we have to do, I think we should be able to achieve that. And maybe finally achieve what is called what we call Gamar Tikkun, which is the final redemption.
We hope that this Tisha B'Av becomes a day in which we can start rebuilding our internal Jerusalem, the Jerusalem of the heart. This process of rebuilding starts with you and me. Only together, we can bring redemption speedily in our days. We hope you have enjoyed this video. For more information, please visit us at our website, www.receivingtheupperlight.com. Shalom.